How would you feel if an almost $20 million acquisition for your company fell through? Because that's exactly what happened to Steve Patti, who's going to be joining me for today's Level Up Business podcast. Hey, I'm Jared Lay, and I'd like to welcome you back to another Level Up Business podcast where we help B2B entrepreneurs level up their mind, marketing, and sales so that you can level up your life and your business. And when it comes to leveling up your mind, we're going to explore how the role of faith and B2B entrepreneurship goes hand in hand together. Now, I understand everyone is on a different place on their faith journey, on their spiritual journey. So for today's conversation, I want to frame faith as simply the confidence of things hoped for, the things that you hope for, along with the evidence of things that you can't see just yet. Even deeper, we're going to explore how faith, business, and branding all intersect together in the age of AI. But before we get into the conversation with Steve, who helps marketing leaders master fundamentals to gain clarity, if you're a B2B entrepreneur, now I'm willing to bet that you have some unique wisdom and a story to tell, just like Steve Patti will share with you today. Maybe you've thought about sharing video content on social media. Perhaps you've thought about writing that best-selling book. But the problem is, you let those self-limiting beliefs stop you from sharing your unique wisdom. You let those self-limiting beliefs stop you from telling your story that will help others level up their business as well. So if you've been thinking about how to elevate your brand to increase revenue, send me a text right now, 832-240-1922, and I'll show you how easy it is for you to turn video content into a best-selling book simply by having a conversation like the one Steve Patti and I are about to have. Welcome to the show, Steve. Dude, I'm so happy you're here today to hang out.
Man, I'm happy to be seen. So likewise.
And, you know, before we get into talking about the role that faith has played in your journey, your entrepreneurial journey, we might even touch on some of the big changes that you're seeing too when it comes to B2B branding and this whole age of AI. I get it. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of chaos happening at a macro level, which then transcends its way down, you know, into organizations, into teams, into individuals, into entrepreneurs, those who are watching and listening to this. But before we go there, what is good for you? What's going well in your world? Give me something positive.
Well, I'm, just a very blessed man in a lot of ways. Great wife, great life. I've been able to work in 12 or 13 different industries over a pretty long career. Managed to live in foreign countries, do business in Europe over 30 years, which has helped me really gain some great perspective to see issues and circumstance through different lens. Navigating some uncertainty like a lot of people right now, uncertainty in my work life, uncertainty in stock markets, uncertainty in, just the places the world is going, right? You mentioned AI and a lot of other trends, and there seems to be this tension between the desire in the workplace to automate and remove people's jobs and do a lot with tech. But then you see a lot of the social damage and the emotional damage and the yearning people have for authentic experiences. And ironically, right before jumping on this call, I saw something in my my LinkedIn feed, an article I'm going to go back and read. It was Rolling Stone magazine. Somebody published it around this new psychosis that's being diagnosed of people talking to ChatGPT and their AI assistants too much. And it's actually creating a new level of psychological and social kind of damage for people. These are unintended consequences that we first saw with our youth with overuse of social media that's been documented in many great books in the last decade. Yeah. Now we've got this new, hey, we want to embrace tech for business, but do we lose our authentic selves in the process, right? So a lot there to unpack.
Oh my God, I'm not exaggerating when I say you're giving me goosebumps, because this actually connects to a recent conversation that I was having in the real world with someone who has been a guest on this podcast, Matthew Abrams. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about attachment theory when it comes to AI. And once we had that conversation, it's just interesting how a couple of conversations that I was having with other people, once again, in the real world at conferences and events that I've been speaking at, some of them have admitted to me of developing these emotional relationships with their AI, like naming them for that matter. And I'm observing. I'm a very curious person. I would, kind of frame the work I do as a digital anthropologist studying the intersection of marketing, sales, tech, and human behavior. And this is why I want to start off our conversation here. The role of faith. It's something that came up in a discussion you and I were having. It's interesting that it has come up in some other podcast conversations, unprompted. Now, this is 100% prompted, but it's come up in other conversations unprompted. And and I get it. Everyone's at a different stage in their faith journey, in their spiritual journey, but it's a growing trend that I am seeing at a macro level. And how is that trend at a macro level going to impact the business world? How is that going to impact teams within organizations? When you start exploring this, some are saying that there's a spiritual awakening happening right now across America, maybe even the world, perhaps even in the business world. I mean, just the other day, I had a friend, I'm going to pull this up on LinkedIn. Donald had posted this. He said, he's actually out in your neck of the woods. I probably should connect the two of you. He said, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And as I wrote about in Banking on Change. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's Romans right there. And it's interesting that the idea of the transforming, the renewing of the mind in Banking on Change, I wrote about the mind is the most important technology that we're going to have to master in the age of AI. Now connect that back to the Rolling Stones article and this mass psychosis that we're seeing. What are you seeing on your lens, through your lens, when it comes to just faith and in your own journey, or what you're seeing at a macro level as well?
Yeah, I mean, we could spend a lot of time on this, and I'll try to compartmentalize the answer to keep the conversation rolling. I think I'm seeing some things that, since you used a biblical reference, another one, you could go back to King Solomon, who said there's nothing new under the sun. And for thousands of years, mankind, has been trying to stuff the big black hole that is in the center of everyone, this unsatisfied place where either through money or through power or through stuff or through sex or through relationships, people are trying to fill a satisfaction void that exists in their life. And what you find, and you hear these big cathartic, admissions on LinkedIn. I'm not going to name names, but several visible execs that come on like, hey, I'm 45 years old. I'm on my third marriage. I've got a, counselor I've had for, or therapist for 8 years, and da-da-da-da. And I'm having these epiphanies that money and success and everything aren't really fulfilling in a lasting way, right? They can, for a season, perhaps satiate, but not longer term. So, for thousands of years, we see this, and richer doesn't mean happier. More stuff, more power, more sex, more whatever doesn't mean happier. And so you've got a lot of searching going on. Now, some of this is out in the open, right? We have this generation of millennial tech founders that talk about building in public. Well, a lot of them are putting their psychological and physical well-being challenges in public, and we read about it in LinkedIn feeds. But, as a bit of a sports fan, one of the guys that I really have followed his career and been a big admirer of is Aaron Rodgers. And I was disappointed to watch the Enigma series, the 3-part series of a guy who's at the end of a self-defining sports career, meaning he's always defined himself through sports. He's now in his early 40s. He's looking for what's next in life, and he's going down. He talked about, I'm located outside of Austin. There's an organization in Austin that books these self-discovery journeys in Central America. You climb in these little tents, you drink the magic voodoo punch, you have, hallucinogenic experiences. And, unfortunately, yeah, man, there's a world of lost people that are trying to fill this. And whether we learn it younger in life or we learn it in our, quote, midlife crisis, or we don't learn it till we're 80, or we never learn it at all, right? 4 conditions. Eventually, the wise man comes to the conclusion that, sure, money, power, influence, all that can make the life here and now a little easier, maybe a lot easier, but it's not satisfying in the long term. So let's talk about, you said, what we're seeing in business. Like I said a few minutes ago, I'm also seeing this same kind of interesting tension like you, and I'm an observer, and having been around the tech industry for a long time. What we saw over the last 15 years through MarTech taking over the marketing discipline is people thought the answer to every problem was technology, right? every problem looks like a nail when all you're holding is a hammer. So the answer to everything was tech. Then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And everybody said, hey, that's okay. We've got tech. We got Zoom. We got all these ways to communicate, even if we're not in the office together. But 2 years into lockdowns, and we had this health issue of, quote, Zoom fatigue. People were just tired of meeting through synthetic digital mediums. And there was this yearning, this craving for the return to live events and whatever, right? And so we saw that. And we continue to see that since COVID. A lot of what I mentioned, I'm seeing in my LinkedIn feeds, I'm sure you are, and talking with people is, again, now with AI and writing your emails, writing your LinkedIn responses and blah, blah, blah. The more people are putting technology between themselves, the less human we are becoming, and the more damage we're creating, where we're losing the greatest things that make us human. Yeah. And it's not my opinion as much as it's my observation, because the data points are, like I said, being published from Rolling Stone magazine, to Psychology Today, to a variety of things by much smarter people than me who study the psychological unintended consequences of technological advancement. It's an interesting play.
I want to pause on that point. I want to come back to this, but I also want to roll back to, I think, something that you were touching on. We're trying to fill this hole in our heart with all of these things of the world. And let me tell you something. I was there myself.
Oh, I was there as well, man, in my 30s.
And yeah, it was probably 28. Had a come to Jesus conversation with my wife. Actually, she had it with me. And she was like, it's the family or the business. And from the outside, people thought, oh my gosh, this guy, and it was right around the time too, 2012, 2013, 2014, you and I think that was when we first connected, actually.
Yeah, 2010 or 2011. So this is just happening just after we met. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yes. And so from the outside, people think, oh my gosh, this guy he's doing amazing things. And I was, but I wasn't. I was so empty on the inside. I was lost. It was truly like a dark night of the soul moment. I was struggling with a lot of addictions, and I was a liar. It was just, I was not the person that A, I wanted to be. I was not the person, B, that I know God wanted me to be. And I wasn't the person, I wasn't the husband, I wasn't the father either. And so like all of these things so this has been a journey for me, at least 12 years, 13 years in the making to get to this point, to have this conversation and to be a little bit more public and to be a little bit more open about it. But what about you? Because like you said, in your 30s, you were there as well. What was going on with you?
Well, I mean, this story may sound familiar, particularly in this age, the last 20 years in the SaaS sector of founders, right? Everybody wants to go found a company to get an M&A exit. So, I grew up in a home where we had, as I like to say, a lot of religion, but no faith. To me, it was, stories and stuff that really wasn't showing up in my life. And so off to college, the only time I went to a church was for weddings and funerals, as I would say. And that happened between ages of 18 and 36. And then what happened is I was already married by that time. And my wife and I had our first child. But the biggest thing I was working on is I had built a $20 million, annual revenue marketing consulting firm. And I managed to build that literally 0 to 20 million of revenue in 3 years between 1997 and 1999. And I was positioned with a financial intermediary in New York City who was shopping the business for outright acquisition. And based on EBITDA multiples at the time or multiple of revenue, we were looking at around 18 to 20 million exit value. And that's 100% shareholder. I built this entire thing bootstrapped out of $42,000 of my own money and turned it into 20 million grossing, throwing off 3 to 4 million a year. So, not bad. Put the MBA to work. My professors were happy. I happened, like a lot of people in life, to be at the right place at the wrong time. And we decided in 2001, I had poured 5 years of my life, 97, 98, 99, building this thing to the 20 million, then 2000, 2001, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars and all of this to position the business, lawyers and intermediaries and all this to exit. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm 30 something years old. I hopefully will land roughly 20 million bucks. Life's going to be awesome. And so we have an August 2001 closing date to sell the business at just under 19 million. And the PE firm that was going to be making, they're the primary lead acquirer on the deal, their principals said, hey, we want to take some last minute summer vacations with our kids in the Hamptons. So let's move the closing date from August 2001 to the end of September 2001.
Yeah.
And on the 11th, the World Trade Centers get bombed, and we are at war with Al Qaeda and ISIS, and we don't know if there's going to be more assaults on the financial markets, and all M&A activity basically comes to a halt. So I was on a 30-day wrong side of about 19 million bucks. So at that point, I have this like nervous breakdown because I'm like, I've poured my life into this. I did all the right things. The gross revenue, the EBITDA, $1 million of revenue per employee. We had won awards. I had a bidding war between Omnicom and a couple of other agency groups out of Los Angeles. I played this MBA textbook perfect. Multiple bidders, escalating terms. My earnout was slowly going down. The values were going up. It was all to play for. And I had already thought about the 1,000-acre horse farm I was going to buy, the Ferrari list. I had it all built, the 3 cars I was going to, I had my life from the world's carnal view of filling this hole when it looked awesome. But then it doesn't happen, right? They talk about life being timing. So retrospectively, when I tell this story, people say, wow, I bet you were resentful. I bet you were, this, that, and the other thing. And I said, well, I also, through that process, realizing that I wasn't going to find satisfaction in that moment, and in my simple mind, all these material things I'd worked for didn't come through. So I'm like, well, what's next? What am I going to do? What's not worth living, but where do I go from here? That's when I became open for the very first time in my adult life to being put in a situation with some people I respected, to be open to a message from God about, brother, you've been chasing the wrong stuff. And my wife and I also had some conversations. We had a 1-year-old, and she said, I didn't marry you to be the absent husband, absent father, because I don't need the 19 million bucks. She's not high maintenance. She's like, it'd be great, but it's not worth losing the family over, because we get one shot at doing this well and doing it right. And a guy that came alongside of me who had been through 3-4 marriages and had all the stuff in Dallas, guy about 15 years older than me, pulled me aside one day. And he said, let me tell you something, young man. He said, your kids growing up will never remember on the way to the softball game or going for ice cream after the soccer game, whether they were sitting on Ferrari leather or Chevy vinyl. All they'll remember is whether you present or were you at the office. Can't come to Dad and Donuts at the school. Can't show up for the games. Can't be at the scouting. Because in our mind, male and female alike, moms and dads, in some household it's the moms with the success addiction, we say we're doing it for our families, but we're not. We're liars. We're doing it for us.
That was me. And my wife would call me out on that time and time again.
We're trying to fill this, because I remember when I got my marketing firm to $5 million in revenue, and I moved into Highland Park, which is the most expensive neighborhood in North Dallas with the historic homes where Jerry Jones lives and everybody else. I felt like I'd made it. And I remember the first Mercedes. I remember the first Porsche. I remember having then the 2 Porsches concurrently. And then I've gotten up to car collections and all that. But it was never enough. It was one more car at the auction. It was one more. Oh, and then we had to move literally 2 blocks to the really swanky address with the bigger homes.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it for my family, right? No, I'm not, because we're trying to fill this.
Right.
And it's never enough. And no matter where you go, who you hang out with, for every guy that's got 100 million, there's somebody with $1 billion. For everybody with $1 billion, there's somebody with $5 billion. I just got back from 2 weeks ago vacation in St. Bart's. My wife and I have been going there for 27 years. When we used to go there 20 years ago, it was a pretty chill little French island. It's now basically an anchoring point for billionaire super yachts. And the entire week there, it was bittersweet. It was a cool return to a place we used to love, but the materialism and the entire fake surroundings, I'm at a different point in life where that actually was a turn off rather than a turn on. I just felt like an alien, a stranger in a foreign land, because that's not who I am, and it's not how I roll.
Well, we all might be aliens in a foreign land when you think about that from a spiritual context. And
100%, man. This life is short. Steve Jobs still died with billions in the bank. Last time I checked, 10 out of 10 people that live a life here on this earth end up dying and being judged in the end. You know what? You can be a billionaire, it doesn't matter. Elon is going to have his day of reckoning, right? The money doesn't save you, and the possessions don't save you.
and that's where one of the, my life's motto, to the point to where it's literally what I wear on a t-shirt. It's memento mori.
Yep.
It's a Stoic philosophy, but it is and I contemplate. It's Latin. Remember your death.
Yeah.
Because I think that for me has shifted everything. It's like every day I wake up, I've died a death from the day before to start anew, to take whatever lessons I learned yesterday. It's a new dawn. It's a new day. I mean, it's the lyrics from a song right there. And be able to apply that going forward, but it's bigger than me. It's not just me anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And I think back to your point of
That's called
St.
dying to
Bart.
self.
Oh, it is the dying to the self. It's the ego. It's what wants to keep us stuck in this temporal space with all of these, carnal things of the flesh. And hey, it's JR. I just want to take a minute to thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to learn and grow together with Steve. If you're a B2B entrepreneur, you want to take your business to the next level, I'm willing to bet that you have unique wisdom to share. You have a unique story to share, just like Steve is sharing with us today, but you're probably letting those self-limiting beliefs stop you from hitting the record button. They keep you from writing that best-selling book because you tell yourself little lies. You tell yourself things like, I don't have time to record. No one's going to listen to me. I'm not that smart. The world doesn't need another book. But here's the thing. These are all lies. And I want you to stop lying to yourself right now. In fact, I used to tell myself the exact same lies. But then I had a coach, I had a mentor, David C. Baker. He told me, JR, you're going to have to write a book if you want to grow, if you want to level up your business. Now, I want to help you do the same thing. That's why I've made it quick and easy for B2B entrepreneurs to turn video content into best-selling books simply by having a conversation just like the one I'm having with Steve Patti right now. So send me a text, 832-240-1922, and I'll show you how easy it is to get started in just 15 minutes. Let's get back to the show with Steve. And I want to roll back to St. Bart's because I think it's a good transition point. And thank you so much for the context. I really appreciate you just sharing your perspective, your path, your
100%.
journey. But let's go back to St. Bart's because you mentioned, I think you might have used the word, the fakeness. You might not have said fake, but it was the inauthenticity. And that was actually connecting back to a previous point that you brought up. What people are longing for today. And I think this is where we connect this back to business. We connect this back to B2B. We connect this back to marketing and sales and leadership. Artificial intelligence. And it's like, I just, I've said this a lot of times on the podcast, but I want people to pause and think. The word artificial.
Right.
We can look at the science of things and realize that artificial color, artificial dyes, artificial flavors, artificial scents, none of that is good for you.
Nope.
Artificial sugars, artificial sweeteners. I mean, all of that. It's like the science is showing that. Okay, great. So this artificial intelligence is now coming along, and there's a lot of transformations that are happening, and I don't think we can perceive what's going to be where we're going to be 3 to 5 years from now. It's happening that quickly. But let's get out of the body for a minute. Let's get into the intuition, the connection with God. Why? It's the longing. And I think your perspective, the more that we put technology, which is really kind of cool. Like the fact that you and I are having this conversation is great.
Sure.
But I remember when we had the conversation maybe a week or two ago, it was an old school voice. Like you and I were just talking on the phone like back in the day. Exactly. There's no video. But the more technology that we put between us, you use the AI as an email example. Where do we go from here, particularly when it comes to business, B2B marketing, sales, and leadership?
Well, I think the same as I mentioned King Solomon's quote about nothing new under the sun. AI is just another shiny object in a long list that
Yeah.
it kept inside its guardrails and swim lane can be a very useful business tool. But like anything else in life, whether it's alcohol, whether it's any other addiction, taken to excess, it causes untold collateral damage. Now, you talked about, the reference to somebody talking to their AI agents. Frankly, to me, that's a little weird. That there's probably a trip to the counselor in order if you're in a place feeling so isolated in your life that you get potentially more satisfaction out of talking to Siri or Alexa or Gemini than you do real people. I mean, I would question some social skills there. But anyways, where do we go from here? Look, I don't have a crystal ball, you don't, and I know it's just one guy's opinion. You're asking for my opinion. I
Of
think it's
course.
like anything else. We have a responsibility to humankind that whatever we make or create, we have to understand where are the outside the lines places where you go from social good to social catastrophe. You look at the gain of function research in the Wuhan laboratory, and this gets out and causes a worldwide pandemic. Do we really need to bioengineer viruses for warfare? Do we need to? So there may be bioengineering that's great with stem cells and other things for cancer, for nerve regeneration after a spinal injury, all that. That's awesome.
Mm.
But do we need to try to create, human beings, or do we need it? So I think my punchline or my net answer would be, where do we go from here? We need to be thinking about governance and guardrails. And I've seen Sam Altman and we talked about Elon and others debating, even in the AI conversation about a year and a half ago. How do we govern this? What governing bodies or oversight between state, nations, industry? Does this end up like the Matrix movie in the end? Because this can get out of control real quick. I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime. Hopefully, I'm long gone after this happens, so I don't have to see it. But look, man, for sure, this is one in a long list of as we get smarter as a society, we may not become wiser in how to use our inventions. Wisdom must come with innovation. Governance and guardrails for social good and not bad actors needs to be calculated into these decisions. In short, just because we can build things doesn't mean we should build them.
Well, there's a couple of references that I can think to make connect a couple of dots here. One is more of a pop reference. I think it was 1991 when Jurassic Park came out. And I pulled up the quote here. Ian Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum. And he said, "You're so preoccupied with whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think if you should."
Love that. Love that. That's
And
100%. That's the ethics dilemma.
yes. So the guardrails I'm following, but then to your point of wisdom, I don't know, like this is where I'm being drawn, led, guided myself to even launch Level Up Business to begin with in the first place, to help other B2B entrepreneurs turn their video content into best-selling books, because the wisdom piece of this, the unique wisdom, every single one of us has wisdom, I think in models and frameworks, and that unique wisdom comes from an individual's or a team's or an organization's their unique perspective,
Based
which is
on
then further
experience. Yeah.
three experiences: unique perspective, lived, learned, and shared experience,
Sure. Yeah.
which is then further multiplied by unique methods, models, frameworks, and
Right.
systems that can communicate that perspective, package it up. That's the unique wisdom piece. Because, and I want to get your take on this. When you think about where we're at with AI, knowledge has become commoditized at this point. So if you look at and there's a pyramid that it's data, and then it's knowledge, and then at the pinnacle of the pyramid, it is wisdom. Now connect that back to someone you've already mentioned on this conversation. You mentioned King Solomon. That's what he asked for. Pray for wisdom,
Absolutely.
discernment.
Yeah.
And then you can connect this back to the ancient Greeks. Once again, it's like, I don't know, there's part of me, it's like, have we been down this rodeo before? Have we been down this path before that maybe we're not the most advanced civilization? Maybe there have been other advanced civilizations in the past that have gotten to this point of technological advancement, and then there was a reset.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Roman Empire is held up quite a bit as an example of one of the greatest, city-states that was ever built that really was never technically conquered from the outside. It fell from within. I mean, the failure from within allowed it to be conquered from the outside, but it's the arrogance. It's all of the things that go back to self, ego, excess, living for a temporal moment without thinking through long-term repercussions, and doing a lot of things not because they're good and right, but because we can. And so, yeah, I mean, there's lots of examples we could, probably best done, in another time. But yes, to your point, we can even look at what's going on in Germany, right? So unfortunately, perpetrators of the First World War, perpetrators of the Second World War, they're now arresting people and pulling them out of their apartments and homes if they express an opinion on social media that the government doesn't particularly agree with. So you're getting now a single voice type of censorship. And it's like, we're all still within the same 100 or roughly 100-year window. Is this going to be the third time? And I'm not picking on Germany. I'm saying countries are falling like amnesia, right? There's in faith and in the secular world, there are conversations about you're one generation away from essentially undoing all the great accomplishments of any civilization. Because, and we see this in going back to biblical references, the ancient Hebrews, right? God's chosen people forgetting a lot of the lessons that they learned. So when the seas parted and they escaped Pharaoh coming out of Egypt, they're thankful. Later in the desert, they're questioning whether they're even going to get fed for the day, and it's back to what I call amnesia. We forget lessons. We don't allow history to be the teacher that it should be, both as a collective people and individually. And why I made that point is because your story about 10, 12 years ago and what the reckoning was that happened in your life between your wife saying, is it the business or us? If you're successful again in the next 12, 24, 36 months with your level of business and you've got a big runaway train, you're going to be back at the crossroad again. So the question will be, one finger at you, two at me, right? As I, speck in your eye, plank in my eye. We have to be constantly vigilant. Because we learned a lesson one time doesn't mean we don't fall in the trap later, because we all get this amnesia.
Yes. Lessons and this lessons will continue until the lesson is learned. And I literally have been having conversations with my wife, being very aware. And so there's this level of consciousness, awareness, awake, whatever you want to call that thing. Then I'm like, okay, I'm seeing some patterns in early marriage that probably led to some addictive behaviors pop up. And I'm like, wait a minute. We're not going to go down this road again. We're going to take a new road. Now we can die in Robert Frost, 2 passive virgin yellow wood, and I took the road of the devil. Renewing of the mind. Yes, and come back to ancient Rome, because I would say who has influenced my mind is the writings of Marcus Aurelius, for that matter. Going back and reading the book of Meditations, and what Marcus Aurelius was struggling with, one of the last great emperors of Rome, he was struggling with the same exact things that we are struggling with now. And so if we can go back and we can learn, whether it's from the Stoics or from the writings of Paul, who was influenced by the Stoics, we can look at all these intersections of history, because to your point, what is old is going to be new again. There's nothing new under the sun.
And by the way, going back to modern day marketing, we're seeing that, like people discovering brand, like this is some new concept. But going back to Marcus Aurelius, I'm just trying to tie forward to where this may end up. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, well, let's actually connect that back to modern marketing, this idea of brand, because for the last 10, 15 years, it's all been lead gen, connecting it. But brand, the way that I think about brand is like the deposits. You and I both have had time in the financial services space. So I look at this brain, not even the brain, that's the biological machine. I'm looking at more of the mind, the software. Brand is making deposits into the mind, the trust fund, the trust bank, that over time will directly influence some sort of behavior because there's been a shift of belief over an extended period of time. What's your take on brand now that we're looping all the way back again to a forgotten art and a science?
Well, brands, when I have to explain this to C-suite peers, when I'm in CMO roles or CRO roles, or I have to explain it to boards, I like trying to find a proxy, an example of something so obvious to them that the light bulb goes off. And then if I can get them there, I can bring them into a more academic description of what brands are and brand marketing, right? Creating and reinforcing durable memories that create preference. I don't want to go too academic, right? So we have to start where they are, someplace simple. So I always use the analogy or the reference point of brands are essentially like in our personal life, reputations that we attach to people. So if you think about, and we think about in our social and professional lives, for everybody that we know, we have some formed opinion. So we have a formed opinion about their competence, their physical attractiveness, their personality, whether we want to spend time with them. I can tell you when my wife and I booked our trip, we thought we'd want to go down with another couple. And so literally we're thinking like, well, who's into food and great wine and kind of the lifestyle stuff that you would do there that's kind of like us? Because we don't want somebody that's a stick in the mud or, so you're literally evaluating even who to go on vacation with based on the experiences that you want. But brands in many ways are like reputations. And if there's one thing I learned the hard way over my career is that maybe being one of the smartest people in the room, but if you're not likable, still doesn't get you where you want to go. If you look at who gets promoted, you look at politics, the corporate world, it's not always the best and brightest. It's typically good enough on the intellect scale, and it's about likability. And so when we think about people's reputations, would you appoint him for this cabinet position in politics, or would you appoint him as a chief whatever officer in your company to represent it? There's a certain amount of critical thinking that goes into their capabilities and their intellect, but a lot of it is the likability factor. And so let's now take this to companies. Brand marketing and brand strategy in its essence is about building a know, like, and trust relationship with a set of audiences, not just for shits and grins, but to influence behavior to something that you want them to do, whether it's referring, whether it's buying, and those are the things that can be obviously measured. So this has never not been a thing, right? I mean, if you go back to J.C. Penney catalogs in the 1920s or Sears and Roebuck catalogs, you think about retailers, you think about athletic shoes, you think about water skis, televisions, cars, anything that you would consider to buy, people you want to hang out with, people you want to work with. We essentially assign and process, I think, in a lot of ways, do we like them? Do they talk too much? Are they a pain in the ass, frankly, to work with? Are they open to new ideas? I mean, there's a reputation. Well, brands in not 100% analogous ways, but when you think about certain brands, for instance, I'm talking to you right now off of an Apple MacBook. And since making a transition 20 years ago out of the Windows world to a MacBook, I know I have brand awareness of Dell and HP and all this, but they're never going to make my consideration set. I'm completely price inelastic. I don't even care what Apple charges. You could say, well, you're paying $4,000 for a laptop. I can give you an equivalent HP laptop for $1,800. I don't care. It's a power brand. Now, some of that is the design of the product, the interoperability with my iPhone. So there are product attributes that drive me to have this brand preference. But the brand is just cool, and the stores are cool, and the experience is different. And so anyways, all that being said, I think that what we have, and I write about this extensively on LinkedIn, is unfortunately a generation of misguided marketers, most of them under 40, who came out of college just frankly at the wrong time, about 2002, 3, 4, 5. So call it the 2000s block. And they've been brainwashed that marketing is a 1P discipline, promotion. They've never heard of the other three in terms of product, price, and place. So even those holding CMO titles, when you look at their LinkedIn, you look at what they write, they're a 1P marketer operating in a 4P world. So first of all, you're handicapped. You only have not even mastered 1P, because even within the promotion piece, their entire world is, quote, performance marketing. And so, yeah, we could spend hours on it. But what I see as a renaissance, old truths becoming new again as if they're new discoveries, but they're not. By the way, the world is not flat. If there's anybody out there, the world is round. But going back to Solomon asking for wisdom, we have to be careful as a society, whether it's AI or other things. It's not just what we know, that's knowledge. It's the application of the knowledge, which is wisdom. And what I saw, I think it was Leslie Venetz or somebody on LinkedIn post at the end of last week, was something cool. And they're talking about LinkedIn etiquette and how to grow your followers to 50 or 100,000 and do's and don'ts. And one of the things that stuck with me is when looking at a comment or a post that somebody else has made, just because you can say something doesn't mean you should say something. Know when to stand down. And so that's wisdom. And I think that we are hopefully having a renaissance of wisdom, whether it's brands and the 4 Ps and some of the basic fundamentals in B2B marketing. But let's take it back to faith. The more people search and the less that they find, the more I'm hoping hearts and minds are open to, I've been looking in the wrong place for the wrong thing. Instead of looking to this plainer world that we live, I might need to go back to asking deeper questions about why am I here, who created me, and for what purpose. Those questions can lead to some startling discoveries if we're looking for them, because biblically, God speaks in a still small voice, but we have to be searching. We have to have the want to. And to me, that's Maslow's self-actualization. That's not achieving everything in life carnally, the house, the cars, it's coming to the point where Paul talks about content in all circumstance. So you asked me at the top of the call, how am I doing, right? And I said, good wife, good life, everything's going well. What you don't know is I had a catastrophic health issue I had to navigate last year. I've had, in the month of April, 3 people close to me, and I learned about 2 of them, deaths. One of them flying down to the Caribbean, the other standing in the St. Martin airport. Buddy of mine, groomsman in my wedding, wife just passed away from cancer, guy sobbing on the phone. He's in Charlotte. And I just prayed with him on the phone right there, man. I'm like, there's no words that I can offer. But you're reminded, I'm a day, 24 hours earlier, sipping great French wine on a beach. But we have these dates that we can't escape. And so there's a cool book out you're probably familiar with, written years ago, called The Dash. And it's this idea when you walk, the book, right? For people watching, on our tombstones, all of us are going to have your born date and your death date. And in between's a dash. The question is, what did you do with the dash? And so if anybody calls me on my mobile phone, they will get a voice recording at the end, or a message at the end that says, make today count.
As we wrap up, man, I really appreciate everything that you have shared for those watching and listening, even for myself, because every single time I have a conversation, I learn something. I take something away.
Me too.
And it comes back to loop this, what Donald shared on LinkedIn. Do not be conformed to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And add to that, to make today count. What would you recommend in closing for someone watching or listening to do just that, to make today count themselves?
Well, I saw your episode with Chris Walker, and it was interesting as Chris is going through his own self-discovery journey of and people can watch that. I don't want to steal the thunder. But I go back to a triangle that was shown to me 20 years ago when I was trying to build my marketing consulting agency by a guy named Dr. Ross Stewart. And he, among other things, helped Herb Kelleher, the founder of Southwest Airlines in the 70s and 80s, build all the cultural hiring, professional and personal development, and all of the structure that made Southwest Airlines for 40 years or so, right, till recently, kind of the darling of the airline industry. People want to work there, right? And Ross drew on a whiteboard in my office in Dallas back around 1998. And he drew this triangle on my board, and it had 2 divider lines. He said, the foundation from a psychology perspective of who you're going to be in life is built on beliefs. So he writes in beliefs on the bottom section of the triangle. He said the center section of the triangle are values. So what you believe influences what you value, and at the top are your actions. He said, so Steve, as you're growing your business and you write job descriptions about what you want people to do, and you want them to have some of the value, some of the things you value, like attention to detail, honesty, showing up on time, excellence, all these things. Most companies in life use incentive and retribution, balancing levers to try to shape action. Even in our own life, we say we want to, get off of addictions. We want to, lose 20 pounds. We play games with trying to do behavior modification. But what you really have to do is go into the values layer, and the values layer sits on the belief layer. Now, in a job interview, you can't interview somebody and ask them questions about faith and all that. But you can ask them about, from a beliefs, what are important to you? What types of beliefs are important to you from wherever you come from, right? What I would say is for everybody to introspectively sit down with a sheet of paper in your favorite deck chair on vacation or wherever you go to walk the dog, on a treadmill, on a run, instead of putting a podcast in, visualize the triangle in your mind and go through the exercise of asking yourself, what do I believe? What do I value? And then the actions piece, which actions, where am I showing up well based on peer feedback, what spouses, kids, community. So let me guard that and keep doing more of it. But where am I not showing up well? And how can I fundamentally get better at that? And for me, I know in your life, because we've talked offline last week, I couldn't work the pyramid top down to the age of 36 of just trying to do behavior. Screw the belief thing. I don't have to worry about that. It's all about, the actions. I had to get my spiritual life in order. I had to get my belief, my worldview in order. That lined up values for me about Judeo-Christian belief and how I needed to treat people, show up in business, show up in my community, show up in my family. The actions became easier. I wasn't trying to rationalize having the 6 drinks and getting in my car, because that's going to lead to some really bad outcomes. And that's not keeping in line with values about protecting my witness, my walk, my reputation, my family. And that went back to why? Because what I believed. I'm not mine, man. I'm bought with a price. And so it's
belief to behavior, man.
So everybody, wherever you're at, man, I just really think, and if you don't know what you believe and you don't know what you value, go through the process, get a coach, whatever it takes, but get your house in order, because showing up every day and making ethical decisions in business, or how decisions of, am I going to work to make the extra 100,000 or 50 grand this year or whatever, those are all individual calls. I'm not here to judge someone else's behavior at all. But I'm just encouraging people, don't wander through life unclear about what you believe, why you believe it, what you value, and ultimately, being intentional about the decisions you make. Because no one can force us to make a poor decision or to adopt a poor attitude. Like you said, renewing the mind every morning. When we get up every morning, we have an opportunity to choose our attitude, reinforce what we believe. If you're guys like probably you and me, get a quick devotional for 10 minutes, get our mind right to renew the mind, so that I can show up each day and hopefully, I don't always get it right, I know you don't as well, but hopefully do our best to make decisions and show up and take action that is consistent with those beliefs and those values. And so, yeah, man, that's, for today, probably my little bit of wisdom, to the extent there is any in that at all.
There is wisdom. I am so grateful for you sharing your unique wisdom that you have gained from your unique perspective, your lived, learned, shared experience. And as we've wrapped up here, you've even thrown out a unique method with that belief, values, and then the actions, behavior at the top.
Yep.
Steve, I'm so grateful for you. If someone's watching, listening, they want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out, say hello, continue the conversation? Started here.
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm in Austin, Texas, so look up Steve Patti, Patti, Austin, Texas. You'll find me, and look forward to connecting.
Connect with Steve, learn with Steve, grow with Steve. Steve, thanks for joining me for another Level Up Business podcast, where we help you level up your mind, level up your marketing, level up your sales, so that you can level up your business and your life. Now, I also like to thank you for joining me for another Level Up Business podcast. It is time to stop letting your self-limiting beliefs hold you back from helping others by sharing your unique wisdom, just like Steve Patti shared with us today. That's because there are people in the world right now They need your help. They need your authentic intelligence, not your artificial intelligence. They need your authentic intelligence. They want to watch your video. They want to read your best-selling book. So text me right now, 832-240-1922, and I'll show you how quick and easy it is that you can elevate your brand as a B2B entrepreneur so that you can increase your revenue by turning video content into a best-selling book.